The very brilliant idea that a simple outline might have the ability to evoke an object or event in its absence emerges relatively late in the history of drawing. When we put pencil to paper, we are more likely to be modelling our thoughts than to be mindlessly reproducing what is before us. Even if we set out to draw only what we see, we will, throughout the time we engage with our subject, be struggling to render our thoughts about what we see, not thoughtlessly copying. I suspect the first drawings were gestures made to assist in one way or another with the communication of thought. Somewhere around the centre of drawing's timeline, there are the dots that are actually stars that in the end we learnt to join with cerebrally generated lines to make images of, for example, the Big Dipper in the night sky. Towards the end of drawing's timeline, there is outline drawing, and in particular, that outline drawing of the world that each of us carries in our head, however badly we remember it. At the very end comes writing. We live with lines whose sole purpose is the delivery of order. There are the lines on maps, mostly drawn by politicians, not cartographers, that establish the boundaries between countries. There are the lines that border agencies draw on linoleum floors at ports and checkpoints that we stand behind with our passports open at the picture page, waiting to be invited to cross. There are the lines that we draw onto roads to facilitate the safe flow of traffic. There are the lines that we draw on grass, clay, wooden and ice surfaces that structure the games we play. They seldom change because they are embedded in the rules of the game. They are, however, redrawn as the grass grows and surfaces wear. These drawings lift drawing out of the art room and into our literacy. Literacy was once understood as simply the ability to read and write. Today it is more than that. Literacy is a lifelong intellectual engagement that helps us gain meaning from the critical interpretation of two-dimensionally rendered information. So numeracy, writing, notation and drawing are all part of a package that we have designed with a view towards enabling us in our quest to model and share thought. Drawing the World was a project that I worked on with 30 postgraduate students from the University of the Arts in London. They came from all departments. And the aim was to make a big drawing of a map of the world onto the piazza, the pavement area outside of St Martin's School of Art at King's Cross. The point of it was that we should make a drawing together, so as a communal activity, and that the making of the drawing would involve both collaboration and thought. It wasn't simply a matter of copying something, it was a matter of negotiation and understanding. And the drone was our eyes. This allowed us to draw a very big image, but also have a distant viewpoint so as to see how it was working. The reason that I chose a map of the world as a subject matter was that it is an image that is familiar to all of us. It's an image that we carry in our heads, however badly remembered. And it's an image that we know not necessarily when it's right, but we certainly know when it's wrong. So we don't know how to draw it often, but we know when we've drawn it wrong. Today in universities, I mean, particularly at UAL, we have students from all over the world. And in our participating group, there were people literally from all over the world. It made it a very interesting discussion whilst we were making the drawing, because people were talking about where they lived, where they had been, and they were locating themselves physically within parts of the map and talking about it. So it did actually, beyond the grid that it sat on, the image that we laid down became a source of conversation.
I see me, drawing is this thinking in duration. I do sandblasting, so I do drawing onto glass. So you kind of have to go through a very slow process, which is very much like thinking. I don't know if you can take, the concept of drawing out of things in everyday life.
For me, drawing is about making connections between quite disparate ideas and influences. I make large-scale collages on walls, and as a kind of, one of the first stages, I'll pin lots of things to the walls of the studio, and I'll start to see connections between shapes and objects and ideas and photocopies of things. And it's a kind of visual scrapbook, but drawing allows me to, find similar forms in some of the things I'm looking at and kind of create a new whole of things that might not necessarily have much order.
I'm going to make a drawing of two jugs. One of them will be in line and the other will be in tone. The reason for that is that drawing really starts with the line. As a professor of drawing, I'm supposed to be able to answer a very simple question. What is drawing? I've struggled with it. You won't find the answer in a dictionary. It'll talk to you about paper and pencils, and it'll say things like what artists do. I think if I was trying to explain to, let's say, an undergraduate student what drawing was, I would say it is part of a family of methods of two-dimensional representation. The primary method we have of representing information two-dimensionally is writing. The secondary method is probably annotation, which would take the form of musical scoring, of mathematical writing, and then probably the other method after that is most important is drawing. And the similarity between mathematics, writing and drawing is that they are all methods of representing multi-dimensional events in two dimensions. And the reason we want to represent them in two dimensions is to simplify them, to simplify the information and make it easier to handle, manipulate, reconstruct and store.
Drawing for me is just at the root of my process. I gravitate towards sculpture, but I have to draw those ideas. I'm obsessed by line. I'm obsessed by one continuous line. I can't rest until that line is pure. I have to redraw that line, and sometimes I'll then redraw that in graphite, and then I'll find it through carving. And I'm a teacher as well, so I'm an art teacher as well in secondary. And we do a lot to do with line and weight of line and what line is and how you can draw line, how you can speak a line. It doesn't have to be a drawn line at all. We use words, we use all sorts of things in school to make the pupils think differently about recording the world. And that line can be so many different things.
My name's Tobias Benedetto, and I'm here to express my deep concerns about the tiny-looking India that I'm very worried about, because it looks like a dead grape rather than a massive subcontinent. So I think something's going to have to be done about that.
The very first drawings were probably not representational. They were things like tallies, they were a way of making marks to keep records. They may have been patterns. We don't really know what they were, but what they look like are geometric patterns. About 35,000 years ago, probably further back than that, people started to draw outline drawings. So in order to make an image of a buffalo on a cave wall, they would draw what they saw as the outline of a buffalo. And this really is the beginnings of modern drawing. It is what I would call basic method drawing, in that it creates like an external skeleton for everything that we call an outline, and by that outline we recognise what it is. And I mean, having done a little bit of experimentation, I can tell you that as soon as children get language, they can name outlines if they know what the object is. For me, as an artist, drawing is something that I use to organise pictures, paintings that I'm going to make. I use it as a way of thinking, of sorting out ideas. I use it as a means of self-expression. Sometimes I draw very carefully and I listen to the radio while I draw, and other times I draw very expressively and energetically. And I see it as, it's a bit like, the difference between sitting on the beach reading a novel and going down to the beach, going for a run, and then a vigorous swim. That you can use the beach in many different ways, and I use paper in many different ways, depending on my mood. So though I often, I tend to talk about drawing in a rather kind of intellectual way, I actually use drawing in a very physical and emotional way. And that is because I work as an artist, not as a designer or a architect, who has, I think you have to have a higher degree of responsibility and rationality when you're designing a building than you have to when you paint a picture.
The normal way that we view maps, they separate out the countries, so usually separate out by really harsh straight lines. And I just think maybe they don't have to be like that, so they can be like in abstract forms, that maybe forms that is quite playful and not just harsh straight lines that we normally see.
I study costume design, and so drawing is a part of exploring different ideas and developing your own ideas and your own sort of process of creativity. In costume, you take the three-dimensional and you turn it two-dimensional to alter it and to develop ideas, and then to turn it back into three-dimensional. There's always the interchangeability between the two. You need to be able to express three-dimensional ideas in a two-dimensional form, and vice versa, because that's the way of presenting your ideas and presenting your own point of view. It's especially interesting in costume because it becomes a physical thing, and then turning the physical back into two-dimensional. It's a really interesting process, and it's something that shows a lot about your own perspective.
Basic method drawing, which is the outline that can be coloured in, is distinct and different from tonal drawing, which is trying to create form, to make things look round, to make them look like they look in a black and white photograph. It's not just recognition of shapes any longer, it's how light behaves when it falls onto an object. What happened when tone was introduced into the game, which came very late in the history of drawing? By 1066, the Norman invasion of England, there was still very little tone in drawing. People still were making outline drawings and colouring them in. So the Bayeux tapestry is a coloured-in outline drawing. It's not really until sort of 13th, 14th century that you begin to see tone being used to create illusions of form. And it's really simple, the way that it's done, is that all you have to do is imagine where the light's coming from, and the area where of the object that is lit by light is light, and the area that's a shape like that, and the light comes in that way, that's the light side, and this side is the dark side, because the light can't get to it because it's hidden by that side. Once you can use tone to create form, to make things look round and to cast shadows you head towards another kind of realism. And that really is the very, very simple history of drawing, is going from a line that was a mark that signified something or made a pattern, to a line that actually really did say dog, cat, bison, king, queen, waves on water, to a line that begins to look like a real thing. It's actually an illusion. And once you get to that point, people have almost invented photography. It's really the difference between the Gothic and the Renaissance in art. The Renaissance made things look round, it made them stand in space, it invented perspective. But what makes perspective really real is when you introduce light to it and objects cast shadows into the space that they are put into. They don't simply sit there as wireframes.
Really exciting day, meeting people from all across the world who are here on different MAs and coming together to draw aspects of the world. So many different styles of line. It was really interesting when those lines began to meet and cross over, and just watching all the chalk dust just flow into one country was really beautiful as well. The main reason why I'm on this course is to shake things up and try new things, so it's been a very interesting day for me.
As this explanation of drawing draws to a close, I want to say a little more about the drawings we imagine might be the beginnings of drawing. And by that I mean the pictorial images of cattle and horses that were drawn some 30,000 years ago onto the walls of the caves in southern France and Spain. Today we know that these are not the beginning of drawing, and that the very earliest drawings were not in fact outline drawings that were designed to evoke presences, but that they were decidedly abstract images, so images that were the product of conceptual thinking and not the desire to imitate earthly appearances. These very first abstractions were made some 40,000 years before the Lascaux and Altamira drawings, which means the story of drawing is not a slippery slope that takes us from figuration to abstraction, but one that starts with abstraction, then discovers the outline and figuration, and from there continues as two parallel pathways, one servicing the pictorial side of drawing, the other servicing the conceptual side. One working in service of Edgar Degas' pastel drawings of dancers, the other supporting Rudolf Laban in his development of a notational system for choreographers. Both, however, share the same objective, that of translating our thoughts surrounding multi-dimensional events into intelligible two-dimensional matter. With that said, I now want to return to that outline drawing of the world that I said at the beginning each of us carries, however badly remembered, in our heads, and ask you a question. Is that drawing of the world a conceptual or pictorial drawing?